I'm in Philippians chapter 4, just a one-off today because we finished up Peter. We had a couple of Christmas ones, and I always like to start out the new year with something along this line. And Paul, he sits in chains here. He's in Rome. He's fought the good fight. He's nearing the end of his race, perhaps, as he's awaiting a trial for his life. We don't know if this is the first trial he went through or a later one here, but he takes time to write to a church that is very dear to him, a church that has sent him gifts more than once to help in his ministry. Paul went there on a second missionary journey when the Holy Spirit would not let them speak the word in Asia. He went out, he crossed the Aegean Sea on the north side and came into Macedonia to the town of Neapolis, which today is Kavala. Joan and I were there a few years ago, and except that we took the bus around the peninsula there, around from Turkey into Greece, and spent the night in Kavala, and then the next morning drove over the hills and then just down into the other side, just a few miles away is Philippi. Huge, big plain. And if you're a historian, you like it too, because it's the place where, you remember Julius Caesar's famous words in after he meets his friends in the Forum there, and Brutus and the others stab him to death. He says, "Et tu, Brute," right? You too, my friend. So in Philippi right there, and just a couple of years later, was where Brutus and Cassius were fighting against Mark Antony and Octavian, right there in the plains of Philippi, and they lost. And so Octavian, or who became Augustus Caesar, we looked at last week, was the victor there. And so it's a town, it's a big Roman town, a lot of things going on there. But Paul shows up there. There's no synagogue like he normally likes to go to the synagogue, and he goes down to the river to pray. So there he meets Lydia, and she becomes a Christian, and as he shares the gospel with her, she and her whole household, she's a worshiper of God and a successful business person. But Paul and Silas also get into trouble as they cast out a demon out of a girl, and they get thrown in the jail, the local jail there. Paul, as you know the story, they're singing, making joyful noises to the Lord, singing hymns, and there's an earthquake, the jail's open, and they don't escape. The jailer thinks everybody's gone, he's going to kill himself. They say, don't do that. And he becomes a Christian also. He and his whole household also. And so this is the thing. And Paul is writing here from his own prison cell, but he's telling the Philippian people to be joyful no matter what's going on. And he starts out this way, saying, finishing his letter here in chapter 4, "Therefore, my brothers and sisters, you whom I love and long for, my joy and my crown, stand firm in the Lord in this way, dear friends." And then he talks about a couple of people in the church there, but he goes on with this probably better, well-known piece here. "Rejoice in the Lord always." I will say it again, rejoice. And it's good that they have the exclamation point, because it is an imperative in the Greek. "Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you." So he begins this out here, first thing, saying, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Jesus said the same thing. He said, "Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. So they persecuted the prophets who were before you." We have to remember that we rejoice when we're persecuted for Jesus' sake. And probably that's going to happen to you, if it hasn't already, to some degree. And of course, in our day and age and society, it's usually nothing that they experience. For us, it might be mocking or something like that. But it's still a type of persecution. And thank God we haven't gone through what many Christians have gone through in just the last generation in many countries, Uganda and Saudi Arabia and Iran, Iraq, etc. And so we have to remember these things. Blessed are you when they persecute you, and they rejoice. And then also Jesus told his disciples to rejoice not in the great ministry they were doing or the power they had. In Luke 10, 17 through 20, he says, the 72 who he had sent out 2 by 2 returned with joy, saying, Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name. And they go on to tell us, and Jesus says, that's great, but nevertheless, do not rejoice in this, that the spirits are subject to you. That's a pretty big deal. But rejoice that your names are written in heaven. Are you rejoicing that your name is written in heaven? We ought to be in this time right now that I think many people are getting pretty tired of the negativity and all the things going on of just, looking at the gloom and doom. It reminds me of my 8th grade math teacher, who was a really up-tempo guy, and we had a lot of fun. I don't remember any math from 8th grade, but I sure remember Mr. Nelson, and he was a Christian. I didn't know at the time there because I was just a little pagan kid. But anyway, he would do all sorts of different things. But when it was somebody's birthday, he'd always sing this birthday tune. Happy birthday, happy birthday, misery and despair, people dying everywhere, happy birthday. And that was a joyful thing for 8th graders, of course. We thought that was pretty fun. But I think that's going to be the new birthday song, I tell you. Straight out of the Soviet Union, 1960s, right? So he says, rejoice in the Lord always. Let your spirit be known, your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. And I used to take this as only meaning the return of Jesus is near, and I certainly believe that. But as I grew, I realized it also means that he is never far away from us. He is near to us all the time. And that's why we can rejoice, because no matter what's going on around us, no matter what's happened in our lives, we can rejoice in him. And that's why the next part says, do not be anxious for anything, but in every situation with prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. So he starts talking about that prayer and petition. Present your request to God. Don't be anxious for anything, or literally nothing be anxious for. And that's another imperative, to be anxious. But he precedes that with the word nothing, may then. But in everything, prayer, petition, thanksgiving, the request, the things that you are asking for. And it's interesting here too, because all the different translations. This translation says, present your request to God. But literally, it is, let it be known. The requests that you have, the things that you're asking, let it be known or make it known to God. Now, I don't know about you, but I thought God knew everything. So if I'm bringing a request to him, especially if I'm in pain or worry or struggling or something like this, I'm thinking he already knows this, right? So why does it tell us to do that? Of course he knows. Why must I make it known? I don't have the answer. I just want to be obedient. I don't need to know the answer. I just need to find out, okay, God, you want me to speak this prayer out loud, this worry, this fear, this anxiousness in my heart? You want me to say it out loud to you? Okay, I'll do that. That's all we need. Half the time, there's no secret. It's simple obedience. And he tells you to, right here, make them known to him. And what's that? It is a form of surrendering, and exactly, and it takes our will to do it. Why is it so hard to surrender?
We can handle
it. We can handle it. Yes, we can handle it on our own. Sorry, Joan said that one. She handles it on her own. No, she's always impressed me with her prayer life, but yes, she likes to get things done, and not get any help. But a lot of us are like that. We're all like that. It's our pride. That's why we don't surrender to him. And it tells us then, the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Shalom Elohim, the peace of God, which transcends all understanding. That means it doesn't make sense in this realm and in what you're going through. How many of you have experienced the peace of God even though things were falling apart around you? I have. Yeah, I imagine many of you have. And when that hits, you kind of like, wow, this is weird. I mean, the only other time I felt that outside of prayer was when they put me on a morphine drip for kidney stones. And then it was like, oh, look, the bed's on fire. It'll be okay. I was just like, wow. But this will guard your hearts and your minds. But I've experienced that peace, where it seems like everything's falling down, and then you go to your knees, you speak it out loud. God, help me. I need help here. I'm worried. I'm anxious. Forgive me. I know you tell me not to. I want that guarding of my heart and my mind. And I think that's interesting because the heart tends to be the seat of emotion for us here. And the mind is what we do all our reasoning with, hopefully. And it's interesting, too, that God placed our mind over our heart, I think. We know that that this is just physiologically pumping here, but at the same time, we all talk about that, but we have to remember, too, that the heart will lead us astray. It's terrible advice to follow your heart. And Jeremiah 17:9 says just that. Jeremiah 17, starting at 17:7, he says, "Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. That person will be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when the heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought." I didn't even know trees worried. "And never fails to bear fruit." It sounds very much like Psalm 1, the first three verses. Then he goes on to say, "The heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? I, Yahweh, or I, the Lord, search the heart and examine the mind." There's the heart and the mind again. "To reward each person according to their conduct, according to what their deeds deserve." And of course, we're seeing one of the Old Testament prophets here, Jeremiah, but he's presaging the work of Jesus here and what Paul is talking about right here. And who knows, Paul, steeped in the Old Testament, understands these things and knows this. But basically, we either trust the Lord or our hearts. And here's the kicker. We are prone to think that if our heart is set on something good, we go, but this is a good thing my heart is set on. So this can't be bad. It must be the Lord. But you know what? It can be a trap. You got to be careful here, okay? Let's take it from the Admiral here. If you fret and worry about these things, pretty soon your mind starts racing in all manner of way, and you completely get your heart and mind off of Christ. And that's all the enemy needs, right? That's all he needs. He doesn't need you to go full-blown into some terrible sin and have all sorts of, failing down and walk away from Jesus. No, he just needs you to be so focused on something other than Jesus that you're no good to God's kingdom anymore, at least for that time. And so that's all he wants to do. It's kind of wounding you there. And it'll shipwreck you. It's vitally important, and I use that word purposefully, vital, because vital is, from the word vitae to life and that, like vital signs and that. It's vitally important, life and death, to trust God, to make known your fears and worries to him and allow him to take them. Do you know why I know this passage so well? Why do you think I know this passage well? It's one of the passages I dislike the most, because it started out when it's there, be anxious. In mine it was, be anxious for nothing. Don't worry about anything. And I failed at it so much. It convicted me every time I opened it up. I used to hate quoting this one because it reminded me that I didn't follow it very well, and I struggled with it. And I know some of you out there deal with the same thing. So on behalf of God, as his servant to you, I just want to say, cut it out. Just stop it. We have to remind each other for that. I think that's why in Hebrews 10, 24, 25, it says, let us consider how to spur one another on to love and good deeds. And he literally uses the word that's like a sharp stick to poke one another. We got to be nice to each other, but we also sometimes have to say some hard truths to one another too, and spur one another on. So he finishes this thought then, so we have to remember, heart and mind won't always agree on things. This one's kind of different from what I said, but it's all I found there, because the brain gets focused on the wrong thing sometimes. The heart in this case is saying, look at all the good, and the brain's not now, can't you see I'm busy, focused on bad? We have to remember those things. So he says, finally, brothers and sisters, as though he's saying, here's the bottom line. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's a high goal to shoot for. And notice that he starts with the truth here, because without the truth, you're adrift. He says, anything worthy of praise, think about such things. And again, it's another imperative. Literally, dwell your mind on these things. It's the mind right here. We've got to take the will and focus on God. Another imperative, to think, consider. It's the idea of reasoning it out on these things. What things? Well, the things that he continues on here. The things, whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice. And the God of peace will be with you. The things you've learned. First thing, ematheta, it's the word, it means disciple. It's the word we get math from, by the way. A philomath is someone who loves learning. I love learning new things all the time. The things that you've learned from me, the things you've received from me, paralipata, it just means that, to receive. Or heard, acousita. What word do we get from acousita? Acoustic, right? See, you thought Greek was hard. Or seen in me, edita. If you've ever heard of eidetic memory, it's seeing symbols and all. It's just seeing things. Idolatry is from the same word too. It's to focus on something else there. But when I saw this the first time, I said, wow, this is interesting. This is, not the first time, but one time when I was reading through and studying this passage, it struck me that Paul kind of backs this up here. Because think about this. You're a first century Galilean, and you're walking near the seashore of Galilee, and you see this crowd there. And there's the rabbi, Jesus, speaking to this crowd. And that's your first connection. You see what's going on over there. There seems to be something happening. So you come a little closer, and you start hearing this rabbi. And you start listening to what he's saying, because you're curious. And if you like what he says, you come in a little bit closer, and now you start receiving this here. You receive it as truth, but perhaps only file it away with other great rabbis. You go, oh yes, I know Hillel, Shammai, many others, Ezra, all the way back to Moses, all the great sages here. This guy's good. He's got some good things to say here. I like this. But if you persist and you continue on, then you would become a disciple. Disciple, matheta, just means that. It's a follower. It's someone who is a student. That's why we have it, that's why we get our word mathematics from it too, because it literally means a student, a learner. And you start following him, and you start learning from him for life. Now I can back it up here a little bit. And the progression seems to me something like this. You start out exploring, that's seeing at him. Then you move to believing. But to get to that point, of course, what was mentioned earlier, you have to get through the cross. There's got to be surrender first. And once you do that, then you become a believer. And then you say, yeah, I'm going to follow this person here. Then you're receiving that, which is the learning. You're learning from that person. And then hopefully we become Christ-centered. And the great thing about that is that you don't have to take a long time to jump up there. It's like staying in physical shape. You have to continue on in your growing of that. So we see this growing, learning, becoming Christ-centered, but we all understand too that not everybody continues on with that. And that's what he says here. Whatever you've learned or received or heard or seen in me, do what? Put it into practice. So you explore, you believe, receive, you're Christ-centered, but oftentimes what happens in our lives is we become stalled. Now this happens to everybody. I don't know a believer that has happened to, whether it's Martin Luther or John Wesley or, who get to a point and go, is this all there is? Did I make a mistake? I think one of the first people who did that, in fact, I know from reading the scriptures, who wondered if Jesus was really the Messiah after believing. Do you know who I'm talking about? Yeah, John the Baptist. Man, when John sends a couple of his disciples, he's in prison about to be beheaded, and he sends a couple of his disciples to Jesus, and he says, are you the one we're looking for, or should we look for someone else? He's wondering. He's kind of stalling out in that there. But of course, he doesn't lose his faith, but he's questioning. It's not wrong to be in that place, but Jesus tells him, go back and tell John what you see. The deaf get their hearing back. The blind have their sight restored. The lame are healed. Knowing, because he's referring to where in the Old Testament? The prophet Yeshayahu, which is who? Isaiah. Isaiah 60 and on through the last couple chapters there, that's the Messiah who's going to do those things. So he tells them that, so becoming stalled out. How do we not stall out? We put it into practice. The Greek word is prasita here. Praxis is the noun, and that's the book of Acts. When you open up the book of Acts, it's called the book of praxis. It means the acts or the doings or the things going on there. So we have to practice these things. That's what I did when I started out, because I played a lot of soccer then in my high school years, and I had to learn to run, and I practiced. I was never good at it. I'm built like the hockey player I am, and not that no one ever mistook me for a marathon runner. No one said, you look like you run marathons. I can tell by the paunch, the broad shoulders, you seem like a guy that would want to run 26 miles. No. And so it's not static, though. We have to practice these things. We've got to get back into the scriptures. So thank you for doing the walking and the memorizing that. I hope you all are doing or reading through the Bible this year. I shared with you last week about the What the Bible is All About book. The great thing is you don't have to work your way up from believing to Christ-centered. You can go there immediately. In fact, most of us do, and then we start to falter at some point because we go, wait a second, I didn't know this was going to take 30 years or 40 years. But it's a lifetime thing. It is a marathon, and it's way harder than any marathon anyone will ever run. And so when you decide to be Christ-centered, not only do you have the peace of God, but now you have the God of peace who will be with you. And that's exactly what we want to do.